late in starting the stream. I scheduled it at 2:30, and here I am at 3:04 p.m. just now starting it. I was trying to get all my research gathered together and so on and so forth. So I have a full lineup for you. I'm going to be responding to a video first by the Progressive Voice where he is off base in his response to Steven Crowder. And then we're going to talk, I got at least two articles has contracted a virus or something that keeps on wanting to scam me through my phone, some offer on Facebook, I don't know. But I got 2 articles about the Syrian attack, and I have a couple articles about guns. That will make sense as we get on finally to the cherry on top, that being the response video to Kyle Kulinski, our favorite liberal foil. So anyway, start screen sharing this right now. All right, and if anybody is in the chat, tell me that you can hear the sound very well as we get through this video. Now, I guess I must first set up the little bit of history that I have about, or my history of being a fan of Steven Crowder. I'm no longer a fan of him right now, but I mean, I used to have been subscribed to him ever since he had 100,000 subscribers, and I unsubscribed from him when he decided to back down from the idea of debating Pothole 54. That was a big disappointment. Never been really motivated to resubscribe to him, but I think that this video is worth noting because of the fact of how unlightened up and plus of how vile Progressive Voice is being. Sahil, that is his real name. Yeah. And so aside from Steven Crowder, I mean, Steven Crowder completely aside, I'm going to be responding to this video on the practice of it. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. Let's just get into it.
I'm sure you guys know who Steven Crowder is. Now, I was watching one of his Change My Mind segments because a viewer sent it to me, and he said, yo, check this out, because it shows that Crowder lost this one. And I think he probably did. Now, what you guys are going to be seeing really quickly here is check out right now what I think is something that makes him a complete hypocrite and shows him being massively triggered. Check that out here, and we'll come back and talk about with that.
If you don't pay taxes, you're going to have other forms of violence that arise spontaneously. This sort of autistic libertarian idea of, oh, you can have a non-aggression.
Stop it! He's been watching Matt Damon videos.
Okay, and so he is going to go on. Progressive Voice is going to go on of defending of how calling each other's other people's ideas your opposition's ideas is justified, essentially. But so anyway, yeah, I mean, I would probably stop a person from getting into that smear tactics of just outright insulting your opposition by attacking their beliefs and attacking them as well, just for merely having beliefs that you disagree with. I mean, it does show kind of a little bit of indecent discourse regarding when it comes to debating. But let's get into this.
This idea of a non-aggression principle is just fantasy. Okay, you have to have.
You said autistic, and yes. This was very civil until you brought that up. Define autistic here.
Well, it tends to be character.
Yeah, I think if Owen McDonald was here watching this, he'd be all like the kid right there is being ableist.
By an overemphasis on logic and philosophy as opposed to reality. You know, it's very easy to argue from syllogisms and axioms and all that.
So hold on a second, I want to make sure before you move, because what you do is you speak in these paragraphs. We need to determine what these definitions are. I think we both agree that's fair.
Fine.
Okay. So you just said that autism, if I'm not mistaken, and I would love for you to bring this up, is rooted more in philosophy and theology than facts, than logic or reason?
Logic, syllogism, that sort of thing.
That's what you believe is the definition of autism?
Well, because it leads you down these intellectual...
No, do you believe that's the definition of autism?
No,
you don't.
I using it in an informal way.
Okay, so you're using it in an insulting way.
You could say that.
Okay.
A little bit of banter.
A little bit of, yeah. Well, we don't call that friendly banter generally. Okay. We call that being a dick.
Yeah. would call him out on that, definitely. So in the chat, I guess I had a couple people waiting. The Coyote said in the chat, Strikeforce is about to start. Oh, heck, I need to get my homework done. Cody Ray 119 says, what time does it start? The Coyote says, I'm not sure. Originally, this was supposed to start at 2:30, but I ended up starting late. Sorry, guys. Anyway.
So I want to go back to hopefully keeping it civil. You know, I wouldn't
not. You're not going to get it
yes,
if you shill for the capitalists.
Well,
they're against you.
Define shill.
Well, if you're
I know you.
Wait. You're a shill for the capitalists. What I understand, shill, is that you do not legitimately believe in what you preach. And he's calling Steven Crowder himself a shill. So that, yeah, we're getting into insult territory right here. Yeah, keep it decent, man. And progressive voice. Anyway, sorry.
Like to sound really intelligent by speaking in paragraphs. One thing, you've misused words several times. And if someone were to call you on it and be as rude as you are, you might look what you might refer to as stupid. Okay. So saying autistic or shill, define, because it's a very specific definition. You came in and just said shill. Yeah. And I'm really quickly to get ready to give the microphone to someone else. If you don't stop doing this, because this isn't the goal of this. What's a shill?
Well, I think you're getting upset because you're losing the debate. But
that's fair. That's fair. What?
Losing the debate. I mean, all you did was just do smear tactics and say it's unrealistic. Okay. I mean, if we are to really get into the philosophy of the non-aggression principle, I mean, realistically, it's virtually unattainable because there's always going to be a little bit of aggression. I mean, particularly if you are rooting for an anarchist society, there's going to be people aggressing each other. People will not refuse, absolutely 100% refuse aggressing each other. But that's all that you said. And plus, smearing him for his beliefs, smearing the belief itself. So I don't, or at least by what Progressive Voice is showing right here. Because he isn't showing the whole debate. I mean, there's a little bit of a cut right there in the edit. So it was quite obvious. Little bit here in the chat. Cody Ray says, no biggie, just came in time. Little Minister says, where did old Kyle start this at? I watched this whole thing and this guy was a complete dick. Go Crowder the whole time. How long do you let that go with that challenge? To not go. Anyway, actually, Metal Minister, we are responding first to Progressive Voice, not Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk. I mean, Secular Talk, that's going to come last in this stream. So it'll be a while.
No. The person who's losing the debate is the one who refers the other person as autistic and a shill. That's generally a good sign.
Okay, to the guy's credit, he wasn't referring to Steven Crowder himself as autistic, but referring to his beliefs as autistic. But yeah, I mean, typically when you start getting into insulting territory, because you cannot find anything truly intellectual to respond with to an intellectual argument. If you cannot respond to an intellectual argument with another intellectual argument, instead you just do smear tactics and insults, it generally is seen as typically that you are losing the debate. So, yeah, being a bit of a jackass there, sir.
What's a shill?
I don't know.
I mean, well, Steven Crowder is being a little bit of a jackass himself by thinking that he was calling himself autistic when really it was just his beliefs that the Mr. Black Jacket here is calling autistic. But he's being a bit of a jackass too. He's all like, oh, you're getting upset because you're losing the debate, when really you opened up with the insulting first. Metal Minister says, oh, gotcha, sorry. Cody Ray says, PV just hates anyone right-leaning. I doubt he even bother watching it live. He probably just went to the specific timestamp that the fan of his directed him to this clip.
The exact definition, but essentially someone who's, I guess, pushing or advancing somebody else's interests, I suppose.
For profit.
Fair enough.
Oh, so you're calling him a shill for capitalists. So you're saying that Steven Crowder does not really truly believe in capitalism? I mean, what if I was to argue for capitalism, dude? I mean, would I be a shill then too? I mean, I'm a working class person myself. I drive a delivery truck. I do maintenance on machines as well as another thing pertaining to my job. And I well, I'm not going to espouse my wage, but it's less than my manager. I mean, I do not make a living wage that would be able to sustain a family. It's just enough to sustain myself. I mean, and I am for capitalism. I am for allowing managers to pay a wage that might not be suitable for raising a family. Does that mean that I'm a shill, that I don't truly believe in capitalism? When really, you cannot read my mind and say whether or not that I do believe in capitalism, because guess what? I do believe in capitalism.
But a lot of these conservatives who...
Well, you're not some of these conservatives are talking to me. This isn't a performance, Paul, here. That's why we're doing this out here. This is a conversation. You're talking to me. I just said I'm against illegal immigration. Hey, you can look at me out. I'm not mad at you. I just think it's rude. It's okay. Don't worry.
Well, it does seem like you're a little bit mad, Stephen, just for the record. But at the same time, I can understand your frustration with the guy if your opposition is going to get into smear and name-calling territory. Metal Minister in the chat. Chances are he didn't watch it at all. He watched or read someone else's far-left take on it, just like his Ben Shapiro got debunked crap. Has PV ever had an original thought? I don't know. I mean, somebody actually pointed out that the biggest thing about Progressive Voice is that he just rehashes stuff that Kyle Kulinski has posted on the videos. In fact, he does that a lot. He'll take other people's videos like Potholer. I mean, he only did that once with Potholer, but in his Steven Crowder debunked on climate change video, he just essentially took a clip of Potholer's video, original video debunking Steven Crowder, and yeah, he was just relying on that information, just like he was just relying on Sam Cedar's information for the Sam Cedar Rocks Ben Shapiro video. And he was just reiterating the same exact stuff, just in a little bit different wording, as Sam Cedar was saying in response to Ben Shapiro. And it kind of goes the same as well with Kyle Kulinski. I mean, he posted this one video called Kyle Kulinski Debunks Steven Crowder or Destroys Steven Crowder on Climate Change. I cannot remember exactly what it was. But he pretty much does rely on completely on the arguments of his own idols. Cody Ray says, I've noticed that, Metal Minister. Yeah, a lot of people are noticing that with Progressive Voice. The only real reason why he is popular is because he relies almost completely on the arguments of his idols, like David Pakman, Kyle Kulinski, and so on and so forth. Now, I mean, occasionally he'll have an original thought, I guess, but still.
We're okay. I'm used to people being rude to me. I'm sure you're probably aware of this to one degree or another. Let's move back to, again, ignore what...
So a lot of Steven Crowder's own viewers were going after him for this one. Now, first of all, he was...
Well, notice that I am, for the record, I am not currently a Steven Crowder fan. Again, I must reiterate. But yeah, there was a little bit that was off base there with Steven Crowder. I mean, the student was not calling himself autistic for believing in capitalism, but was calling his beliefs autistic. That's the one thing. And the other thing is that he said he wasn't mad when really it did seem that he was actually mad. But I really think that the student or whoever the guy or whoever Steven Crowder was talking to, whatever he was being a bit of an asshole.
Yusuf wasn't calling Steven Crowder autistic, but rather the ideology. And also...
Okay, what if I was to open up in a debate with you, Progressive Voice, to say that progressivism is autistic? Is that a legitimate argument, or does that just sound like an argument of desperation or whatnot? I mean, you hear people all the time say liberalism is a mental disorder, and I used to... I mean, it went way back when I was in my right-wing Christian echo chamber days. I thought that that was something fun to read. But nowadays, when I look at that, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, it's not a legitimate argument, and it's just nasty. And you're not making your own side look any more good or decent when you just say, oh, the opposition is a mental disorder. Metal Minister says in the chat, I'm not sure how popular he actually is. Yes, he's got 15,000 subs, but he's only averaging like 500 to 1,000 views. That's awfully low for the number of subs. Yeah, I mean, but at least his channel is still getting some growth. I mean, to Progressive Voice's credit, at least.
So shill is a very, 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 mild word. Autistic.
No, not with the definition that the socialist guy there was given, saying that you're just peddling out other people's beliefs, kind of to give the implication that you yourself do not believe in those beliefs yourself. You know what? It might be somewhat mild, but I can see how a person would find it very insulting because they're accusing you of being fake, not being a true person of principle, to believe in those principles that you're preaching.
I could kind of see where you could kind of get that if you were in an actual respectable debate. But when you're Steven Crowder and you have
Okay, well, what about in that one case? I mean, were they being in a respectable debate until the socialists said, hey, your beliefs are autistic and you yourself are a shill for capitalists? I mean, was it decent? Or are you going to provide an example of that one particular stream that he was doing, of where he was insulting the socialists, and then the socialists just said, oh yeah, gloves off. I'm going to call you, your beliefs autistic and call you a shill? Or was it decent up until the moment that the socialists actually called him a shill and his beliefs autistic? But no, Progressive Voice is just going to bring up an example that is not really associated with this particular stream.
Historical context and that kind of a history, that's not something that should really trigger you. Now, let's look at what was said by Steven Crowder here. Check it out.
Okay, before we get onto this clip, Metal Minister says in the chat, I'll have to catch the rest later. Good luck keeping your sanity, bro. PV will test it. Yeah, and so will Kyle Kulinski. Excuse me. And so will the Kyle Kulinski video that we're going to watch at the end of this stream.
Look, they're confused. They're confused. You know why? Because I'm not your gender studies professor who has to cater to your trigger warning, microaggression, safe space bullshit. I didn't want to do this. I wanted to come out and tell a few jokes. You created this monster. We have to go. 10 more minutes of this. Let this reverberate. Let it be a life lesson. This monster right here that you're so afraid of, the face you see in your nightmares, was created by social justice warrior assholes like you. And now you have this wonderful faggot. That's what happens. You okay? We good? Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Darling, you can call me what you like.
Oh, okay, there we go. Crying out loud, listen. Nobody here wants to hear your opinion that much. Here's what's so crazy. You couldn't wait 5 minutes. Unlike leftists, we have an open panel and a Q&A session because we want an open idea. Oh, I'm a racist. There you go. That's a new one. Where'd you learn that one in Social Human Studies 101?
So who's...
Okay, so when I first saw Progressive Voice playing that clip as an example, I laughed my ass off because in that particular example of Steven Crowder roasting the shit out of social justice warriors, he was calling them names, calling them assholes and so on and so forth because they were being assholes. I mean, if you play that one particular clip of Steven Crowder roasting social justice warriors, he says, I come out and this one audience member gives me the finger. And so basically members of the crowd are just being a whole bunch of rowdy, obnoxious assholes. And so Steven Crowder is kind of hitting them back with saying, hey, guys, you guys are being assholes. Stop it. So it's not like Steven Crowder was just opening up as the first one to get all insulting. His opposition in that case was being insulting first, and so he decided to get insulting back. Just like it's the same thing in the case of the socialism is evil live stream, where the socialist student right there was getting insulting first, and then Steven Crowder was getting insulting back by saying, hey, you call that banter, but we call that being a dick, implying that the socialist guy was being a dick to him. So this ain't hypocrisy right here. For Steven Crowder, in one moment, trying to keep it decent, but then in another moment, a couple of years back, is all like, a notice of how indecent his opposition was getting, and then he decides, hey, I'm taking the gloves off. Cody Ray in the chat. YouTube would sometime will what? YouTube would sometime will glyph the numbers if your subs and views first thing you lose a large amount of subs and gain back next day. What? I don't understand that. Glyph, Glith. I wonder if that was a typo or something, Cody. Anyway, let's get on with this. This gets more funny right here.
Who's being the fruitcake social justice warrior?
I will give you the benefit of the doubt that Steven Crowder is a bit of a fruitcake, but but that's his motivation. That's his whole entire intent and purpose, because he's a comedian. His purpose is to be a bit of a fruitcake. Cody Ray says that he meant to say glitch. Okay, yeah. I get where you're coming from, because I have seen a few examples of where people's like to dislike ratios or views will get kind of inflated, or even their sub counts, or sometimes they'll just randomly lose a like, sometimes they'll randomly lose a dislike. I mean, it's happened on a few of my videos where I'll randomly lose a like or I'll randomly lose a dislike. Anyway,
the role that you're talking about now, Steven Crowder, because I'd love to know. Because in that one, you call Milo, I forget what it was. You say, like, call him a faggot or something like that.
He's totally missing the context of why he's calling Milo Yiannopoulos a faggot. He's calling him that because he knows that he's buddy-buddy with Milo, and Milo doesn't give a shit if people call him a faggot. In fact, he practically adores being called a faggot by his friends. Milo does. I mean, he even refers to himself as the dangerous faggot. So if his friends, in this case, Steven Crowder, calls him a faggot, he doesn't give a shit. It's not like Steven Crowder was calling him a faggot to be insulting. He was calling him a faggot to be funny. Totally different from the socialist calling Steven's beliefs autistic and calling him a shill. Totally different. I can't believe that progressive voice is comparing the instance of Steven calling Milo playfully a faggot and the instance of the socialist calling Steven Crowder seriously a shill and his beliefs autistic.
And, you know, you think that you're all edgy and an edge but when someone else does it in a conversation with you, in which I don't even think that it was really all that malicious.
It wasn't really all that malicious. Oh, bullshit, guy. Bullshit. Was he being serious in his calling him a shill and calling his beliefs autistic? I mean, it doesn't matter of how calm the person is trying to express themselves. I mean, it just goes to show how much more robotic their emotions are, all while having their words come out as aggressive. And sometimes, I don't know, me personally, it annoys me more when a person gets this snooty attitude and they still remain calm, but at the same time, they get nasty with their words.
Especially not shill. Autistic, maybe it's towing the line, but again, like I said, was somebody with a historical...
Okay, so if he's calling him autistic, is it justified for him to say, hey, shut up, calm yourself down, don't get insulting?
Context, like Steven fucking Crowder and the clip I just showed you, how...
You're totally conflating the two examples. In the example that you just played there was no hypocrisy being showed. I mean, I'm sure if somebody was to find some other clip of Steven Crowder being the first one to get insulting with his opposition before his opposition got insulting with him, I'm sure a person can find it. But in the two clips that we are looking at in this video particularly, that was not a sign of hypocrisy. That was not an example of hypocrisy when he was roasting the social justice warriors and calling them assholes for, yeah, being assholes, being rowdy, obnoxious, and rude.
How can you be the person who says, oh, you SJW liberal fruitcakes and your trigger warnings and safe spaces, and then you call Milo whatever thing that you said, and then
he said faggot, you faggot.
And you go on to say, oh yeah, are you bothered by that? I goes, no. So why can't you live up to your own fucking standard? Because to me,
I think his standard is keep the debate civil, but if your opposition continues to insist on being uncivil, then take the gloves off yourself. I mean, I do that with Owen McDonald. I mean, he insults us all the time of being a bunch of transphobes and all other kinds of accusations of bigotry that he'll throw at us. And I just decide, hey, fuck it, get insulting back with them back.
It seems at this point, you're just trying to score. Well, two things. I want to say two things about this. Number one, it seems like you're just trying to, score these kind of debate points. But number two, I wanted to say that you were losing that debate. And that's the truth behind it, right? You were losing that debate, and you.
No, there wasn't hardly any attacking of the substance. And I would kind of agree that Steven Crowder was going on too long about how insulting the socialists there was getting insulting, of how Steven Crowder wanted to keep it decent. If I was in his position, I probably would have been something like, hey, cut the insults, let's keep it civil, go on, make your substantive point. I mean, I'll just give you the benefit of the doubt. He was going on too long about that, but there was no groundbreaking, super convincing arguments that the socialist was bringing up. All he said was that the non-aggression principle is unrealistic. I mean, does that mean suddenly I should give up on libertarianism suddenly? I mean, yeah, not very convincing. Or at least with the clips that you showed. Progressive voice.
Found a way to get out of it. You used the autistic joke like 20 seconds later for a laugh, or like a minute later or something like that. So Steven Crowder, he's just trying
to show the clip for us to get the context. I don't know. I'm just gonna completely dismiss that because he does not play the particular clip that he is talking about of him using Steven using autistic as a joke a little later.
Ride this wave, this anti-SJW wave, and then it's self-evident by the fact that he doesn't even live up to his own fucking standards, man.
His standard is keep it civil, or else I am going to get down and dirty with you. That was not meant to be a sex joke, by the way, people. Yeah, that was quite laughable. He totally conflated an example of Steven Crowder getting mean with people who were getting nasty themselves, and conflating that as a sign of hypocrisy for one that he would prefer to keep a debate civil. Ridiculous. Anyway, so let's get on with the article section here. Get on to talking about the possibility of, or getting on to talking about the Syrian attack, more specifically. An attack Syria did not do. This is from CNS News, by the way, and this is a commentary. And I found this, I mean, I've read it before, obviously, but, excuse me. But when I reread the title, I find this quite interesting. Because if Syria did not attack anyone, then that would be a case of where Donald Trump was completely unjustified in attacking Syria, or at least in my opinion. I mean, if somebody wants to bring up international law and how the Assad regime wasn't supposed to have chemical weapons at all, well, then I guess it ain't a complete unjustification for him to attack somebody who is breaking international law. But it's still not justified enough for me to think that Donald should have attacked Syria. I mean, even if they were to kill their own citizens. Anyway, I'm rambling too much. So the Airbus A300 was supposed to be on a short flight across the water to an affluent tourism center. There were 290 people on board. In the first few minutes of the flight, a Defense Department report would later explain the Airbus followed a regular commercial air corridor, climbing toward an assigned altitude of 14,000 feet. But at 13,500 feet, there was an explosion and the plane fell into the sea. All on board were killed. President Ronald Reagan, as the Associated Press reported, that 4th of July weekend in 1988, soon issued a written statement. Oh. I'm sorry. I think they might be talking about something in the past. This might not be associated at all with the recent Syria attack. Let's continue reading to find out. This is a terrible human tragedy, Reagan said. Our sympathy and condolences go out to the passengers, crew, and their families. But that did not placate the Iranians. The USS Vincennes, if you pronounce it like that, operating in the Strait of Hormuz at the foot of the Persian Gulf, had fired 2 missiles at Iran Air Flight 655, while also engaged with a number of Iranian gunboats. The captain of the Vincennes mistakenly believed he was taking down an Iranian F-14. Tehran radio, as reported by Reuters, broadcasted Iran's immediate reaction. We will not leave the crimes of America unanswered, it said. We will resist the plots of the great Satan, avenge the blood of our martyr from criminal mercenaries. 5 months later, Pan Am Flight 103, a 747 packed with Americans heading home for Christmas, took off from London's Heathrow Airport heading toward New York. As it flew over southern Scotland, a bomb exploded in its cargo hold. A Scottish court later concluded this explosive device had been contained within a Toshiba radio cassette player in a brown Samsonite suitcase along with various items of clothing. The 747 dropped 31,000 feet to the ground. All 259 people on board were killed. So too were 11 more in the Scottish town of Lockerbie. I'm going to quickly check the chat here. Nothing new. Did the Iranians do it? Was this their murderous revenge for the accidental drowning of Flight 655? Did their Syrian allies help them? On November 15th, 1991, the New York Times retrospectively summarized the initial thinking on the attack. For more than a year, investigators had pursued a theory that the bombing was ordered by Iran and carried out by a Syrian-based terrorist group in retaliation for the mistaken downing, of an Iranian airliner by a Navy warship in the Persian Gulf in 1988. But meticulous investigators did not stop seeking the truth. A posting on the CIA's online museum explains how a crucial piece of evidence discovered on the ground in Scotland helped prove that Libya, not Syria and/or Iran, was responsible for the attack. Interesting. In 1989, months after the plane crash and end of the formal recovery effort, a piece of scorched shirt was discovered. Says the CIA posting. The piece contained a fragment of circuit board that the heat of the explosion had fused into the shirt's polyester fabric. The Scots photographed the circuit board fragment and gave a photo to the FBI, it says, who passed a copy to the CIA, where a Directorate of Science and Technology, DS&T, electronics expert observed 2 things that reminded him of a device he had seen before, a timer from an earlier Libyan terrorist attack. Further analysis confirmed that the fragment exactly matched part of a timer circuit manufactured specifically for the Libyans. In November 1991, the United States and Scotland indicted alleged Libyan agents for the attack on Pan Am 103. I want to make some things clear from the outset, State Department spokesman Richard Boucher, B-O-U-C-H-E-R, said the day the indictments came out. The bombers were Libyan government intelligence operatives. This was a Libyan government operation from start to finish. You know what? I think I might just move on because this is kind of irrelevant. Or I don't know. God, take off this one glove because I'm getting an ad that's popping up here. Checking the chat there. Nothing new. I want to make some things clear from the outset. State Department spokesman Richard Boucher. The day the indictments came out. The bombers were... I'd already read that paragraph. When President George H.W. Bush was asked by reporters about the Libyans being indicted for the Pan Am 103 attack, he said, Syria has taken a bum rap on this, it appears. In response to the attack on Pan Am 103, an indisputable act of war against the United States, Congress would have been justified in authorizing the use of force to overthrow the regime of Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. Instead, the U.S. worked to isolate Gaddafi and encircle him with sanctions. After the U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003, Gaddafi gave up his weapons of mass destruction programs, paid reparations to the families of Pan Am 103 victims, restored normal relations with the United States, and recognized we had a common enemy in Al-Qaeda. Then President Obama used military force not authorized by Congress to help rebels overthrow Gaddafi. After Gaddafi fell, the Islamic State established a foothold in Libya. The moral in this chain of events: look before you shoot. End article. Yeah, I would say that overthrowing, I don't know. I mean, if Gaddafi is ordering the shooting down of American citizens flying in a plane, well, then I would think that it would be somewhat, at least somewhat justified to overthrow Gaddafi. I mean, especially if he posed a future threat to national security or even international security in this area. Towards Americans, of course. I mean, other people's citizens, they aren't our responsibility. As far as Obama overthrowing Gaddafi in present day, like over 20 years after the Pan Am 103 attack, I would say that it's not justified because you're striking the iron while it's way too cold. British Prime Minister May. Okay, so now we are getting onto the Syria attack as of current day, the one that just recently happened. I mean, British Prime Minister May. If chemical attack confirmed and if Syria responsible, they must be held to account. British Prime Minister Theresa May said on Monday that if the chemical weapons attack in Syria is confirmed and the Syrian regime is responsible, it must be held to account. Okay, I would say that probably they should be held to account if they were like killing your own citizens, Theresa May. But if Assad is killing their own citizens, which is pretty screwed up, yeah, but it isn't really our business. I mean, that sounds cynical, I know, but still, cannot be policing the world in these affairs. In a statement released on Tuesday evening after she spoke with U.S. President Donald Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron, a spokesperson for May said virtually the same thing. If confirmed, let me check the chat here again. Yeah. If confirmed, this is yet another example of the Assad regime's brutality and brazen disregard for its own people and for its legal obligations not to use these weapons, May said Monday. If they are found to be responsible, the regime and its backers, including Russia, must be held to account. The statement May's office released on Tuesday night said that she, Trump, and Macron agree that if the attack is confirmed, then those responsible for it should be held to account. Here's the full text of the statement by May's spokesperson. The Prime Minister held separate telephone conversations earlier today with the U.S. and total disregard for its legal obligations not to use these weapons. Yeah, I mean, Syria is completely not in the right in this case, breaking international law. I mean, I don't really care for international law in all honesty, but it's still a little bit of wrong in their part. Even if international law might be unjustified, and they're breaking international law so that they can commit an even bigger immoral act, that being killing its own citizens, Syria killing its own citizens with those said chemical weapons that were illegally obtained. But it ain't our responsibility for us to be protecting another country's citizens. I mean, if that is really the case, well, then you might as well be having an open borders immigration policy and just allowing anyone to come in at all at massive, massive numbers. They agreed that the international community needed to respond to uphold the worldwide prohibition on the use of chemical weapons. They agreed they would continue working closely together and with international partners to ensure that those responsible were held to account. End article. Yeah, Theresa May I mean, I don't want to use the word neocon, but being a bit of a neocon herself. An interventionist. All right, so now we are getting on to the guns part of this whole this stream, as it will make sense more on down the line when we finally get to responding to Kyle Kulinski's Parkland shooting video. Stop this from CNBC, and it's talking about NRA money. And I find it kind of odd because when you go into the Google search for this article, it says in the Google search, NRA money isn't why gun control efforts are falling, commentary, CNBC.com. But then you actually click on the article, it says in the top title, stop blaming the NRA for failed gun control efforts. Like it's, it changes its title as you click the article for some weird ass reason. So anyway, stop blaming the NRA for failed gun control efforts. Now this is coming from CNBC, not exactly the most conservative source for somebody to get their news from. So there is a little bit of weight, I would say, to this article if they're saying that NRA is not the main cause as to why gun control legislation is not getting through. So in the article, once again, many of the angry responses to the latest mass shooting focus on blaming the NRA. But the NRA's influence and financial power is widely overstated. Advocates for reducing gun violence fail by focusing on fighting with the NRA instead of winning over the public with specific proposals. That's a pretty good point. And when we get onto the Kyle Kulinski video, you'll know more what I'm talking about. As both Kyle and the shooting survivors, they mostly go talking about the funding and not about the principle of gun control itself, which it kind of makes the conversation a little bit unsubstantive. It usually only takes seconds after a mass shooting for a chorus of people to begin blaming the National Rifle Association for allowing these atrocities to happen. You know how the government goes. The conventional wisdom is the NRA's heavy spending stops hundreds of politicians from enacting the common sense, quote unquote, gun control laws they and everyone else would otherwise support. So that's kind of given the implication that that Republicans don't really believe in gun rights to the extent that they do. But the only reason why they pose to be against gun control laws is just because of the NRA. Like, it's weird. Like, you know what? Speaking of which, I haven't come across any example. I haven't heard any gun control advocates point out an example of a gun rights advocate politician before they were ever elected into office, not being for gun rights, but then as soon as they take NRA money and are elected into office, they totally have this big shift when it comes to their gun beliefs. I mean, it's just assertion, it seems like. I mean, not the fact that they are taking money, but it's just assertion, it seems, that they are saying that the only reason why they are not acting on gun reform is because of the NRA money, not pointing out as to whether or not they did or did not believe in more gun control before they took NRA money. You know how the argument goes, here's the latest sampling of this tried and true response. And it's showing some tweets from Hillary Clinton. The crowd fled at the sound of gunshots. Imagine the deaths if the shooter had a silencer, which the NRA wants to make easier to get. Okay, that's the thing, though. These silencers, they aren't really silencers. I mean, they just muffle out the sound just a little bit so that it's a little bit easier on your hearing when you hear the gunshot go off. But it's not like it's a complete and utter silent like you see in the movies. This goes to show you how big of an influence that Hollywood has. And people argue against Ben Shapiro on that point. I mean, Ben Shapiro was over-exaggerating of how influential Hollywood can be on the public mind. But I think that that might be an example of how Hollywood is a propaganda tool by making people think that silencers completely or almost completely silence the sound of the weapon. Our grief isn't enough. We can and must put politics aside, stand up to the NRA, and work together to try to stop this from happening again. And the next tweet is from Chelsea Handler. We have to elect candidates that are not funded by the NRA in November. We have an opportunity to elect candidates who won't allow kids to go to school and get shot. It is disgusting how many times this has happened, and Republicans do nothing. They all have blood on your hands. Okay. If they were to like order a shooter, or if they were to like order an NRA member to go for a school shooting, I would say that they have blood on their hands. But the fact that they are having very little, they want to have very little hand on the issue of guns. It's a hands-off policy. It's not a hands-on policy. If this was like hands-on, then you would have more of a case as to how blood is on their hands. But they're just, if you are pushing more and more for gun rights and less gun regulations, then that is a lack of action. And I don't see of how a lack of action would make blood be on your hands. Andy Richter also tweets, tonight would be a good night to donate to one of these great organizations that fight every day for common sense gun control. At Moms Demand, at Everytown, at CSGV, at Brady Buzz. More importantly, vote for candidates who put the safety of our families over their own financial interests. You know how they put the safety of families first when they go fighting for gun rights? Is by allowing the heads of those families to own guns to protect their own families. They're acting like you cannot possibly for people's lives if you are for gun rights. There's only one problem with that theory. It's all wrong. Of course, the NRA does spend money, and it does have a sophisticated and persistent messaging operation, but so do dozens of other organizations and causes. So how does the NRA stack up against them? Not too well. The NRA gun makers and gun rights issues do not even show up on the Open Secrets website lists for top lobbying firms, top lobbying sectors, top lobbying issues, or top lobbying industries for the years 1998 through 2017. The figures for Florida Senator Marco Rubio are particularly educational, since he has been a target of a lot of anti-NRA screeds since the shooting in his home state. A look at the top 20 donors to Rubio directly and his PAC since 2009 does not include the NRA. Okay, so the NRA does not have the biggest influence on his beliefs. So I do not see of how, if he did not accept NRA money, how that would affect his pro-gun rights beliefs. And yeah, I'm kind of defending Marco Rubio in this one because a lot of people go attacking him for taking NRA money and go thinking that that is the cause as to why he's not pushing for gun reform. When really, seemingly going off of this article, he really just does naturally not believe in high amounts of gun control, like the people criticizing him are for. Over his career since 2009, Rubio has raised a total of more than $91 million in donations. The NRA is responsible for just over $3 million of that. Wow, that is pretty small. Or 3.3%. Big whoop, as they say. Yes, $3 million is a lot of money and more than most of us could ever donate to anything. But context is everything. And even a so-called poster boy, quote-unquote, for NRA donations would only be 3.3% lighter in campaign cash without them. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be important to keep in mind this information. Again, that certainly doesn't mean the NRA isn't spending a lot of money, but the PolitiFact fact-checking website puts the total amount of NRA spending since 1998 at $203 million. Yeah, not even $250 million. That figure is even smaller than it looks when you consider 30% of Americans, or about 100 million people, own a gun. By contrast, Wall Street and the broader financial industrial shelled out more than $1.1 billion in the 2016 election cycle alone. The financial, yeah, you have the total non-gun lobbying donations, just more than, or almost 5 times more than that of the NRA over a mere 10-year period. I mean, compare of how NRA's total spending might have been just in 2016 alone compared to the rest of these organizations. It would be dwarfed even more so. The financial industry employs only about 6 million people in total. The bulk of that 203 million that the NRA has donated since 1998 doesn't actually go to candidates, as the hysterical tweets and finger pointers seem to believe. It's spent on those issue ads that you see mostly on cable news channels during election years. But even if those ads are extremely influential, they are a much different animal than direct campaign donations to individual congressional and presidential candidates. There's even a question of whether the NRA is very persuasive among actual gun owners. Fewer than 20% of American gun owners are even NRA members. That should tell us something about the chicken or the egg argument about the gun lobby. The NRA is much more likely piggybacking off the beliefs of gun owners as opposed to framing them in the first place. The real power is with those voting gun owners, not the lobby group that purports to represent them. Yeah. I mean, ridiculous. I mean, the NRA is like dwarfed by all this other spending, and plus, they do not have that big of an influence on the approval ratings of America for gun rights, it seems, according to this CNBC article. Some gun control advocates are wise to this fact. New America Senior Fellow Lee Drutman has been working to debunk the myth of the all-powerful NRA's money for several years. Beginning in 2012, he noted the NRA hadn't even made donations to a majority of members of Congress. He also made the correct designation between allegiance and influence. That is, the NRA supports candidates that already align with its philosophy as opposed to paying them to toe the line. So there's the evidence. There's the evidence right there. The NRA is not funding these politicians to change their beliefs to be pro-gun, but are funding people who are already pro-gun before they even gave a cent to them. So for people to be acting like the Parkland survivors, like Kyle Kulinski and the rest of the NRA people, for them to act like that it's because of the NRA why politicians hold certain beliefs, it's just ridiculous. According to this article right here from CNBC. How's the chat looking? Let's see. The Coyote is in the chat asking, what did I miss? Well, I got talking a little bit about some 1980 attack from Syria on an airliner. I responded to a video by Progressive Voice. And right now I'm getting into the gun issue as we are prepping ourselves to get responding to Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk. Former New York City mayor and media billionaire Mike Bloomberg has thus made a futile point over the years to combat the NRA's money machine. Bloomberg founded Every Town for Gun Safety in 2014 based on matching the NRA's financial clout. It hasn't been a total political failure, but in the wake of so many mass shootings since 2014, it's also fair to say it's more on resurrecting the anti-gun violence measures Americans have supported in the past. That includes beefed up policing and improved background check systems. Well, as far as background check systems, I mean, there might be some certain flaws. I'm just giving the benefit of the doubt. There might be some certain flaws about the background check system. But when I got my, probably exposing a little bit too much about myself, but when I got my own firearm, I did have to go through a criminal background check for here in Kansas. So there is a criminal background check. You can argue that it's not long enough, but it's not like we aren't getting checked at all. And as far as mental health background checks go, it seems ridiculous to just completely bar these mental health patients from getting a gun when really, there's only about 4 to 5% of those mental health patients who end up violent at all. Checking the chat. DeCoyote says, thanks. You're welcome, DeCoyote. A misbegotten path is introducing new rules and misrepresenting them to the public. That's what happened last year when Democrats tried a proposed rule that they and most of the news media portrayed as a way to keep guns from the mentally ill. But it really sought to put people into the federal government gun background database if they received disability payments from Social Security and received assistance to manage their benefits due to mental impairments. That's a far cry from mentally ill. Even the ACLU and mental health advocates lined up against that idea, not just the NRA. Now, this article is really hard-hitting. You probably have to read it again to fully absorb what they're saying here, because this is quite a bit of information being taken in. A similar mistake is being made with trying to put everyone on the TSA's no-fly list into the gun background check database. Again, the ACLU swooped in to join the NRA in opposing that idea, since that list is notoriously error-prone and using it would also deprive people of due process. Yeah, I think I hear consistently that former Senator, now dead Senator Ted Kennedy, was on the no-fly list himself. In each case, the NRA's power was overstated in getting those proposed laws defeated. That's because in each case, the NRA had a lot of help. Here's another example of pro-gun control advocates following a misbegotten path. As he's showing a screen cap of a tweet from Barack Obama, "We are grieving with Parkland, but we are not powerless. Caring for our kids is our first job. And until we can honestly say that we're doing enough to keep them safe from harm, including long overdue common sense gun safety laws that most Americans want, then we have to change." The problem with that tweet isn't the sentiment. Okay, so it's done with reading the tweet. The problem with that tweet isn't the sentiment, but the use of the loaded common sense term. Everyone is for common sense, but not everyone defines it the same way or even seeks to define it at all. That's pretty good right there. It's a pretty good point. Mr. Obama should know by now that legislative efforts need to be a lot more specific than that to succeed. Yeah, common sense. It is pretty vague, as it's showing right here. Highly defined new rules stand the best chance of succeeding because they have in the past. For example, we already have a national ban on gun dealers selling handguns to anyone under 21 years old. In light of the spike in school shootings carried out by current and recent students, gun control groups might want to start by pushing for extending that under 21 ban to all firearms. Yeah, I mean, as far as the mental cap when it comes to guns, I am all open to the idea of raising the cap on gun ownership to 21. I mean, we do that with alcohol, and logically speaking, we do not have the same set of rights given to people in the age range of 18 to 21 when it comes to alcohol. So why not also when it comes to guns, I say. I mean, the whole reason why it's a different set of rights for people under 25 in general is because their brains are not fully developed. You never stop developing your brain until you're 25. And if somebody was to say that people are not allowed to vote until they're 25, well then by that logic that I just brought up there, it would be understandable in my opinion. And this is coming from a 23-year-old. So if we were to really put down a law that said you're not allowed to vote until you're 25, this would affect me too. And I am sitting here saying right now that if somebody was to do a law like that, it would be understandable. Anyway, I'm getting off on a far-off tangent. That's just one idea. But the bottom line is going to nasty war with the NRA isn't a productive path for anyone. People in favor of reducing gun violence and mass shootings need to focus on specific choices and set out to convince the public to back them with their votes. Then the politicians will be forced to follow. Quote, dump the NRA, unquote, is a bumper sticker, not a policy. America needs a new policy. Yeah, I mean, the person writing this article sounds fairly liberal in that they want more laws regarding guns, but at the same time, they're saying that it isn't solely the NRA's responsibility. And that article, the writer of that article was pointing out of how these politicians, these gun rights advocating politicians, their beliefs did not suddenly change overnight to become gun rights advocates just because they were suddenly donated $1 million by the NRA or whoever. But really, they held those beliefs beforehand. The Coyote says, all gun control does is make it harder for law-abiding citizens to defend themselves. Yep. Okay, so next and last article that I'm going to be reading, and then we'll get onto the response to Kyle Kulinski on Parkland. 1 second. All right. So this from USA Today. No, there have not been 18 school shootings already this year. Okay. So I kind of wish that I had like an article that was talking about the entirety of school shootings on a year-by-year basis here in the country. But this, for right now, was the easiest thing that I could find. Actually, I found it through Mr. Dapperton. He made a video talking about mass shootings. But yeah, maybe if the gun issue comes up again, I'll go trying to look further into mass shootings and school shootings. But anyway, enough meandering about. Amping up fears only undermines efforts to reconcile parents and civil rights advocates who want to protect the Bill of Rights, is the quote on top there. See what the chat looks like. Oh, God. Loudmouth Reviews in the chat says, Google it as a crush on you. Don't even mention Google it to me. And she's become a real disappointing, arrogant cunt as of recently. The Coyote says, wait, am I the only one here? Hooray, Loudmouth is here. I think Loudmouth might have left suddenly, but anyway. Column, get the numbers right on school shootings. No, there have not been 18 school shootings already this year. Misleading stats make finding a solution to the problem of gun violence that much harder, says David Mastio, deputy editorial page editor. No, there have not been 18 school shootings already this year, as CNBC, Politico, The Washington Post, ABC, the New York Daily News, and briefly a USA Today column all reported in the hours since a 19-year-old allegedly slaughtered 17 at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida on Ash Wednesday. Fake stats like that make finding a solution to the real problem of gun violence, which has actually struck American schools at least 6 times this year, that much harder. Amping up fears and muddying the search for fixes that can cut back the senseless violence only undermines efforts to reconcile the real concerns of parents and the legitimate desire of civil rights advocates to protect the Bill of Rights. Every Town for Gun Safety, the gun control advocacy group responsible for spreading this bogus statistic, should be ashamed of its blatant dishonesty. When parents hear the words school shooting, their hearts freeze and their heads fill with images of Sandy Hook, dead and dying grade schoolers, broken and bleeding in a classroom, helpless teachers crying over their charges, and slain colleagues as a black-clad killer switches magazines in his AR-15. That's mostly not what Every Town is talking about. At least when the Washington Post reported Every Town's propaganda, it included some important caveats. That data point includes any discharge of a firearm at a school, including accidents, as a shooting. It also includes incidents that happened to take place at a school, whether students were involved or not. So within the first few paragraphs right here, you're already getting a raised red flag in your head, thinking, "Oh, these do not sound a whole lot like shootings." I mean, if in some cases students aren't involved, and if in some cases there's only a discharge of a firearm, but nobody is dead, and it includes accidents as well. The post should have kept including caveats. By every town's criteria, nobody has to be injured and the shooting doesn't actually have to take place on campus, though it does have to be heard on campus or a bullet has to hit somewhere on campus. This is the problem with the terminology and whatnot, is that people have different definitions of things, unfortunately, and so it just muddies up the conversation on guns and on other issues. On January 3rd, a 31-year-old military veteran who suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, a traumatic brain injury, and depression shot himself in a school parking lot after he called up police to report he was suicidal, according to the Lansing, Michigan State Journal, part of the USA Today network. Everytown removed this instance from the report after the Post found that the school had been closed down for months. Yeah, it was a school shooting, definitely, but nobody died from it. On January 10th in Denison, or at least that's what it seems anyway. On January 10th in Denison, Texas, at Grayson College Criminal Justice Center, a student mistook a real firearm belonging to an officer who was authorized to carry the weapon for a practice weapon and fired it into a wall. No one was killed or injured. That counts as a school shooting? Jeez, what a bunch of pussies we have in this country then. On February 5th in Maplewood, Minnesota, a third grader pulled the trigger on a police gun while the officer was sitting on a bench. No one was killed or injured. It was still pretty damn dangerous circumstance. And how dare you touch another man's gun when it is holstered to them? In 8 of the 18 cases originally counted by Everytown, no one was injured or killed. 2 were suicides. Wow. Policing the USA, a look at race, justice, and media. Wait, are we getting into a different article or is this the same thing? 1 second. How much longer does this go? Okay, no, it's the same article. So, policing the USA, a look at race, justice, and media. And it sure isn't necessary to inflate the number of school shootings this year. The real number, according to a stricter definition used by the Post, is at least 7 shootings targeting teachers or students. USA Today's news department counts 6. In any case, that's about 1 a week since the beginning of the year. A horrifying statistic. Indeed, in one case, Everytown included a school shooting in a town with fresh scars from a real school shooting. On January 10th, according to the Desert Sun, a gun was fired from off campus and a bullet struck the Visual Arts building at California State University, San Bernardino. No one was killed or injured. Everytown counted that ambiguous incident as a school shooting anyway. That must be mystifying to those who suffered through a real murder-suicide shooting in San Bernardino's North Park Elementary School just last year. In April, an angry man gunned down his estranged wife, who was a teacher. Before killing himself, he hit 2 of her students in the process, killing 1. So only 3 people dead. The teacher, the 1 student, and himself. And really, I wouldn't technically include the shooter in the crime statistic of how many dead. I mean, anyway. The people of San Bernardino and parents all across America know what a school shooting is. We don't need fake stats to pressure lawmakers into action. The real facts are horrifying enough. David Mastio is the deputy. Okay, anyway. End article. David Mastio seems to be a fairly liberal, a fairly liberal news writer. The Coyote says in the chat, to be honest, the media lies so much, I am not sure who to trust for my news source anymore. yeah, I mean, it gets pretty difficult. Who can you trust? All right, so putting my phone aside as a way to just measure the chat. And we are going to get on to the next video, the final video. The cherry on top, the creme de la creme of this of today's episode of Strike Force, and that being this video that I am pulling up right now. Actually, you know what? Okay.
So,
all right, so I got the article, or I got the video set up on the computer. Screen share, screen one. Okay. Before we continue, I actually gotta take a bathroom break, so sorry guys for making you wait. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Funny in the chat here, De Coyote is saying, no, not secular talk. Yes, secular talk, De Coyote. Because guess what? Kyle does not get responded to enough. But here we go. Colossal majority of Americans want gun reform, poll by secular talk. You know what? Never mind that. We are going to continue just with this article in particular. Yeah, my sound is on. Okay. So, I was requested by the Josselman to do a response video to this. Actually, originally we were going to do a co-op response video to this, but the little bit of a drama that gone down surrounding Josselman. I will just leave it at that. That's it. I'll just leave it at that. Won't go into the details. But because of that, I did not really want to burden him with responding to this. And at the same time, him having to deal with that said drama. So I just decided to go at it alone and respond to this video. Let's get to it.
We might be witnessing a sea change on the issue of guns at the moment. So for one thing, many of the mass shooting victims' friends from the shooting in Florida are now in the public eye, and they're speaking out in a stronger way than I've ever seen on any other issue. So I want to take a look at that here. Here's a little clip from a speech by a student named Emma Gonzalez.
You know, and there's also this one other kid called Kyle Kulinski, and I think there's like a second kid who was a victim of Parkland as well, who are both speaking out for gun rights. I actually have to look at more clips of Kyle Kulinski, and I think there was a second kid. I cannot remember the guy's name, but I will say that there is at least one positive coming out in all this, and that is kids getting more involved into freaking politics. And so I don't think that kids get involved enough in politics, honestly. You know, seeing all the total drama recommendations over there. Yeah, I'm a bit of a total drama freak. But anyway, I digress. Let's get on.
If the president wants to come up to me and tell me to my face that it was a terrible tragedy and how it should never have happened, and maintain telling us how nothing is going to be done about it, I'm going to happily ask him how much money he received from the National Rifle Association.
Oh, man, the audio there was just staticky. Okay, so you are not going to address the statement in of itself of how there is nothing we can do. You are not going to say, hey, Mr. President, there is actually something we can do. Instead, you are just going to throw out this kind of a red herring. I don't want to say that it is a complete red herring, but you want to side switch to this one other issue of who his donors are instead of attacking the issue itself of guns. I mean, yeah. Dakota says, didn't Emma Gonzalez bully the shooter? She openly did admit in this very same speech, but you know what? Secular Talk doesn't play that part of the speech. Now, I don't think that it's the Parkland students' own fault that Nick Cruz gone out on this. Like, I'm not going to hold them responsible for that guy's piece of shit actions. And you know, just to address that clip very quickly, Emma Gonzalez did say to those of us who said that we shouldn't have ostracized Nick Cruz, well, guess what? You didn't know him like we did. To that, I have to say, so does that mean, Miss Gonzalez, that you are going to advocate for the death penalty on Nick Cruz? Because you do know that the death penalty is being considered for Nicholas Cruz. And in my personal opinion, I think that he fully deserves the death penalty. I don't care about if he was like mentally unstable. You cannot tell me that there wasn't at least an intent in his actions to want to go ahead and kill all of his fellow students. Dakota also says in the chat, he received money from the NRA because Trump stood for gun rights. Yeah, and that's okay. Honestly, I was skeptical as to whether he actually believed in gun rights during the election. And honestly, I'm not so confident as to whether he actually does believe in gun rights right now. But still, he was claiming at least to believe in gun rights. I don't know. Was he saying that he believes in gun rights before he had ever received a cent from the NRA? I don't know what the exact timeline is in that. But the CNBC article that we just got done reading a little while back before that school shooting article from USA Today, the CNBC article was talking about of how a good portion of these politicians who are for gun rights, they already had their gun rights positions before they even received campaign donations from the NRA. So it's a bit of a moot point, the whole funding issue of these politicians. But that's what they are going to continually keep on mentioning throughout this entire video, this entire 16-minute video. This is going to take me a while, so let's continue. something about that. She sounded like a little 6-year-old the way that she said that. I don't know. It's just, I just found it funny.
$30 million!
Damn, that audio. I got to turn down the audio. So, and to the $30 million comment, I say, and
Divided by the number of gunshot victims in the United States in the 1.5 months in 2018 alone.
Wait. Let me rewind that a bit. Was she citing the false mass shooting statistic that we just debunked there with the USA Today article?
The United States in the 1.5 months in 2018 alone. That comes out to be.
Okay. Rewinding again. Sorry.
I already know. $30 million! And divided by the number of gunshot victims in the United States in the 1.5 months in 2018 alone, that comes out to being $5,800. Is that how much these people are worth to you, Trump? If you don't do anything to prevent...
Okay, no, she was just talking about gunshot victims in general in the United States. And no, I have to say something, Miss Gonzalez. You know, ever since that the assault rifle, or not assault rifles, because assault rifles are still banned to this day, as far as my knowledge goes. But ever since the lifting of the semi-automatic and high-capacity magazine ban in 1993, ever since that was expired in 2003, we have been noticing a little bit of a drop. We have been noticing a considerable drop in gun homicides, while gun ownership has been going up at the same time. So there's not exactly a correlation there with gun ownership and gun violence. In the chat here, Jimmy Hall says, Kyle Robert E. Lee was the president of the Confederacy, Kulinski. Yeah, we're responding to Secular Talk, our favorite lesbian softball coach, showing a video of the skinhead lesbian. Sorry, I find that comment just mildly amusing.
This from coming and continuing to occur, that number of gunshot victims will go up, and the number that they are worth will go down.
Excuse me, murders or homicides, gun homicides have been going down. Jimmy Hall also says, meanwhile, in gun-free zone Britain, machete attacks and stabbings. Yeah, Jimmy Hall, are you from the UK? I just gotta ask. I also hear that the UK is pushing to ban knives. I haven't done the full extent of research into that, but that's what I'm generally hearing from Mr. Dapperton and so on and so forth.
And we will be worthless to you. To every politician who is taking donations from the NRA, shame on you.
The question is, did they already hold their pro-gun rights beliefs before they had received assent from the NRA? That CNBC article says otherwise. And NRA donations do not automatically mean that a little 6-year-old dies with every $1,000 that is given to a politician. I mean, it seems to be just a big boogeyman, a big scare. Jimmy Hall says no, U.S. Okay, never mind then. Ducati says and acid attacks to add on top of Jimmy Hall's comments. And if I may expand on that point, for all the people who say that NRA is literally a terrorist organization, I would challenge them people making those allegations to cite an example of an NRA member who is directly ordered by the NRA itself to go out and commit a mass shooting. Then I will say that the NRA is a terrorist organization. But if the NRA is not condoning and pushing for more shootings, I'm not convinced as to how it's a terrorist organization.
If your money was as threatened as us, would your first thought be, how is this going to reflect on my campaign? Which should I choose? Or would you choose us? And if you
yeah, you see, there are these people called voters, and some voters are for gun rights. And so if the politicians was to go against the will of those said voters, and that is going to affect their chances of winning re-election. And considering most gun rights advocates, I mean, the strong gun rights advocates, the people who want to keep AR-15s legal here in the United States, since the bulk majority of those people are not going to be voting for a Democrat, but they'll be too disappointed to want to vote for anyone if a Republican in their appropriate district goes against their will, then that will definitely affect the election for them.
you answered us, will you act like it for once? You know what would be a good way to act like it? I have an example of how not to act like it.
So you aren't going to bring up an example of fighting for it, but you're sorry, distracted with the chat here. Jimmy Hall says, have you heard what happened in Deerfield, Illinois? No, I have not. Please amuse us, Jimmy. Dakota says, I am 13 and I am part of the NRA and I am a what? And I am not a terrorist, okay? 13? You really that young, DeCoyote? I thought you were older than that. And do they really allow 13-year-old members into the to be members of the NRA? Anyway, I'm going to rewind this just a little bit. Lost my train of thought.
On my campaign, which should I choose? Or would you choose us? And if you answered us, will you act like it for once? You know what would be a good way to act like it? I have an example of how not to act like it.
So you are going to attack the actions that they are doing right now without offering a solution to the issue that we are talking about right now. That is not very that much productive. The Coyote says in the chat, indeed.
2017, 1 year ago, President Trump repealed an Obama-era regulation that would have made it easier to block the sale of firearms to people with certain mental illnesses.
Here's the problem to that, Miss Gonzalez, is that only 4 to 5% of mentally ill people end up violent. So I don't know about you, but in my personal opinion, it seems like an unjust execution of the law if you're going to be punishing an entire group just because a minority of people in that said group commit a crime. I mean, that's like if we was to completely bar black people from owning guns just because a small majority of them end up being violent. I mean, just to bring up an example, everybody. I mean, it's pretty much the same, and they are both equally stupid, in my opinion. But if you want to narrow down the people who are violent to one mental illness, to like a majority of people of one type of illness, okay, I don't know how to exactly word this, but I think it would be more productive if you were to narrow down the people who are violent in the mentally ill community down to a majority of people of one particular type of mental illness. Then we can talk about barring those types of people because the super majority of them are violent from getting a gun. Until then, I don't see how productive it would be to just blanketly bar anybody of any mental illness like OCD, ADHD, PTSD, and so on and so forth from ever owning a gun.
From the interactions that I had with the shooter before the shooting and the information that I currently know about him, I don't really know if he was mentally ill, but I wrote this before I heard what Delaney said. Delaney said that he was diagnosed. I don't need a psychologist, and I don't need to be a psychologist to know that repealing that regulation was a really dumb idea. So
in your case, it probably would not have helped with the Parkland shooting, but in other cases, you think that it would have massively deterred other shootings. Is what I'm getting from what you just said there. Citation, please.
Republican Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa was the sole sponsor on this bill that stops the FBI from performing background checks on people adjudicated to be mentally ill. And now he's stating for the record, well, it's a shame that the FBI isn't doing background checks on these mentally ill people. Well, duh! You took that opportunity away last year!
So that.
Well, I'm not so okay. I mean, just go buying off of what she said, it does seem quite ironic. But in the case of Nicholas Cruz himself as an individual, they had information on his whereabouts and his intents, and yet no government official took action to actually prevent him from ever owning a gun. And more importantly, no government official, nobody in the local police force stopped him from killing any more people in that shooting. So it doesn't just narrow down to one single government fault that Chuck Grassley is ironically mentioning. Also, probably ironically being against reforming that area. Jimmy Hall in the chat says, did you see the pictures of Cruz when the police had him on the ground and were cuffing him? His eyes, dude. He didn't look like he knew what planet he was on. Yeah, I don't know. I still think that it's open, that the death penalty is open for him, in my opinion.
That's incredible for a variety of reasons. I mean, first of all, you would never, ever, 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 ever.
We get it, Kyle. Ever, 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 ever. Stop repeating yourself.
Ever, ever, ever see elected Democrats be that aggressive and that forthright and that concise in their messaging. And if they were, that would land in a way that you have no idea how much that would reverberate through society and how much people would appreciate arguments like that, because she's really cutting through the bullshit and getting to the heart of the issue.
Okay, she only mentioned one issue, and that was a mental health issue. And I had already stated as to why it would be an unjust execution of law if you were going to blanketly bar people of mental illness from getting a gun. But aside from that, which was faulty, she was only talking about NRA funding, in which that does not get down to the nub of the matter of guns itself. You're talking about an indirect factor that might have little to no effect on how politicians think about gun rights.
Hey, you took, she said 30 million. I read 21 million. But look at the debate we're having. Is it 21 or is it 30? It's fucking ridiculous either way. He took a colossal amount of money from the NRA, and now, shocker, he likes to sit on his fucking fat ass while kids are getting slaughtered, and he doesn't propose any idea that would fix it. Now, the common dodge from the right is, well, it was really mental health. It's about mental health, so we need to address that. Really? Then why did you guys try to repeal Obamacare 60 times? And why did you guys destroy Obamacare? Trump did through executive orders. And why are you guys trying to cut Medicaid right the fuck now?
Okay. Getting into just... No, it's not a red herring. I was about to say that it was a red herring, but I'm pretty sure that you can address mental health in of itself without having to nationalize the entire industry of health insurance to be all controlled and funded by the government. Pretty sure you can just attack one facet of healthcare in the country without having to go with a blanket solution on all of it, of giving the entire monopoly of health insurance to the government. Jimmy Hall says in the chat, I would like Kyle to tell me what Obama did after Sandy Hook. He's about to get into that in this video, actually. The Coyote says Muslim vegans shot up the place at YouTube headquarters. Yeah, I mean... ever since then, it seems that the gun conversation has kind of died down, and now people are talking more about the Syrian attack.
So, okay, you say this is about mental health? Great, then I guess you're going to support a bill that allows universal access to psychologists and psychiatrists under a Medicare for All system, right?
How does that address the... I can't even. How does that attack the nub of mental health in of itself? God. I think I've been going on too long in this live stream.
No, you're not, because you're fucking liars. That's what you are. You're deflecting. That's what that's called. It's
no, that they aren't liars and that they want to just attack the issue of mental health without having to nationalize the entire industry of health insurance.
Deflection, it's
via single payer or Medicare for all, whatever terminology you want to give it.
Obfuscation. They're going to do nothing about this. Nothing. So here you have a student who's doing what elected Democrats throughout the country should be doing, but they're not.
You know what? And by the way, for the record, I'm not going to be white knighting for the NRA or for Republicans. I mean, there might be a few issues that we could go at. Like, I say that I'm totally open to the idea of raising the cap on gun ownership to 21 years of age instead of 18. But it's just so off base, the response from Kyle and the Parkland survivors on how to handle the gun issue. The Coyote says in the chat, ironic. Yeah, it's quite ironic that the gun issue all of a sudden just disappears after you have this one shooting that happens in a gun-free zone in one of the most gun control heavy states in the country. Yeah, it's ironic. Jimmy Hall says, speaking of Syria, how many Syrians will we kill to punish Syrians for allegedly killing Syrians? I don't know. I mean, I would prefer that if Trump did not get intervening, unless we have like a personal, unless there's like a, I'm trying to think here. Anyway, unless our own people were actively endangered by Syrians. By the Syrian government in particular, by the Assad regime.
She has to do it after she saw her fucking friends get killed. And you wouldn't ever even see the media do this. Like, again, the job of the media is to hold people in power accountable and get the truth out there and get facts out there. You would think that somebody in the media would go, okay, hey, let's do an objective breakdown of what happens with guns in the United States versus guns in other countries. And
yeah, I'm trying to do, and what I'm doing is an objective breakdown of what happens with mental health and whether or not it's justified to blanketly prevent them from owning guns. I mean, I'm not a representative of the entire mainstream media, obviously, but still, there's one example of somebody talking about the stats and the facts.
You will see very quickly that we have way more mass shootings than any other country, and we have way more guns than any other country. So maybe there's a fucking connection there, and maybe it makes sense to do a universal background check and a high-capacity magazine ban.
Okay, here's the thing about mass shootings and school shootings. First of all, I just got done reading that USA Today article talking about how the definition of what is a school shooting is rather dubious because people have different definitions. People define a gun just being discharged, but with no deaths at a school as a school shooting. When really any sane individual would not, I mean, technically it was a shooting and it was at a school, but there were no deaths that were actually caused. So it's not like we have to take this massive overhaul on gun legislation and prevent people from owning AR-15s just because there was a gun that was shot, but nobody died at a school shooting. And another thing about school shootings and other mass shootings, they only contribute to like a few hundred of the deaths of the gun homicides in this country. Out of the 10 to 12,000, as you're going to mention, Kyle. I mean, it's dwarfed by the amount of handgun deaths are caused in this country. I mean, as I mentioned in my response video to Progressive Voice, who was responding to Ben Shapiro on the issue of guns. What was I going to mention? I lost my train of thought there. Jimmy Hall says in the chat as well, gun control works really well in Chicago, high capacity. I assume he means 30 rounds in a magazine. For an AR-15, that is a standard capacity mag. Okay. Oh, I now remember what I was going to mention earlier. And the overall gun homicides has been dropping ever since the 1993 gun legislation that Bill Clinton and Feinstein had instituted had been expired in 2003.
And some other gun reforms. But no, nobody in the media would bring that up. Nobody in the media. You're going to see people on fucking, you're going to see Wolf Blitzer go, Donald Trump took $21 million from the NRA and now he's doing nothing and he's their puppet. You're never going to see him do that. It's taking a victim's friend in a Florida shooting, a high schooler, to make the argument that...
Okay, sorry. Just saying that somebody is funded by the NRA, that does not offer any solutions, that does not attack the nub of the matter of how it is and why it is that so many deaths occur. And plus, you have to look at the flip side when it comes to guns. I mean, yes, they can be used as a tool for gun murders, but they're also used as a tool for self-defense. So if you were to, the more gun control legislation that you push for, you're not only, I mean, how would it really overall affect the overall stats? Like for whatever gun homicide that you may prevent through legislation, how many more violent crimes will happen because some innocent Sally wasn't able to defend themselves with a gun because Uncle Sam said, "Oh no, you cannot own a gun." I mean, not saying that you guys want to completely ban guns, but still, because Sally found it way too hard and way too expensive to get access to a gun. Jimmy Hall says, let us compare the money the NRA gives people compared to other groups. The NRA aren't even in the top 20 of donors. Yeah, exactly. As I read in the CNBC article earlier this stream.
Democrats should be making. So all the credit in the world to her, and fuck the elected Democrats and fuck the media for not making this argument. And there's more here. I want to show you some of the students. They sat down on the show Face the Nation, and here's what they said.
March for Our Lives has support from everybody. And at the end of the day, this
support from everybody except for gun rights advocates.
Isn't a red and blue thing. This isn't Democrats and Republicans.
I'm sorry. I hate this pretentious line from gun control advocates saying that this isn't a me versus you thing. The thing is, yes, it is kind of a bit of a me versus you thing of gun control advocates versus gun rights advocates. You know why? Because people have two different solutions and two different beliefs to try and solve the issue of gun murders. I mean, gun control advocates will be all like, we need less guns to prevent murders. Gun rights advocates will be all like, we need more guns so that people can defend themselves to deter themselves from being murdered. I mean, it's just such a stupid, pretentious line from that is, this ain't a red and blue, this ain't a conservative versus liberal thing, or whatever one party versus another party dichotomy you want to use. That dude right there was happy. Jimmy Hall says that dude right there was happy Rand Paul got attacked. What are you talking about? This kid right here, the pretentious kid?
This is about everybody and how we are begging for our lives and we are getting support, but we need to make real change here, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
So, Emma, what is the plan? You say you want to spark a national movement. It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to actually make it happen. What are you going to do?
Okay, Jimmy Hall says, answers my question, yes. That guy right there who is trying to come off as humble in this interview right here, then later decides to arrogantly and borderline psychopathically say that he was happy that Rand Paul got attacked. I mean, I heard of that, but I did not know who the specific person was that said, oh yeah, Rand Paul got attacked. Happy day. But if that is the kid, well then yeah, fuck him. I don't care if this guy, I don't care if this kid is younger than 18. I don't care if he survived a Parkland shooting. You do not wish death on somebody just because they have like a difference in belief. I mean, it's not like Rand Paul is actually actively advocating for more school shootings. He's actively advocating for people to be able to defend themselves more from other murderers. That being people owning more guns. You know, Jimmy Hall says also in the chat, all gun laws do is hurt law-abiding citizens. Criminals don't follow the law. If Jack the drug dealer wants a gun, he is going to get one. Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of a vague and weak talking point. I'm going to be honest right there, Jimmy Hall. I mean, it kind of makes a case like, if it's pointless to legislate on guns just because criminals are going to get guns anyways, well then makes the case, what point is it to legislate on theft, rape, and murder? DeCoyote says in the chat, I shook hands with Rand, no joke. Well, congratulations, DeCoyote.
Well, what we have set up right now, we have a website, March for Our Lives. We're going to be doing a march in March on Washington where we get students all over the country are going to be joining us. These kids are going to make this difference because
and you know, fast forward a few months later, there was like a footage of some Walmart security guard walking through the Walmart of how kids during the march were just trashing the Walmart. They weren't really caring about the issue of guns. They just wanted to cause a ruckus because they were being a whole bunch of spoiled little brats. Jimmy All says, black markets, dude. Think about it. Prohibition of alcohol didn't work. The drug war right now isn't working either. Yeah, no, I'm getting what you're saying about the black market, but it seems to be, I don't know, seems to be a bit of a bad argument to say because people are going to get it anyway, therefore we shouldn't legislate it at all. I mean, I'm going to play devil's advocate and for the gun control advocates and say that the reason why that they want to legislate on guns is not to completely eliminate guns, but to try and lower it. Now, you might argue the stats in saying that more gun control laws does not lower the gun crime, but that's their logic on why they want to legislate it. It's not because they want to completely prevent criminals from getting guns, but because they want to lower the overall gun homicide rate and even the gun suicide rate. Like, I don't even get that, because if a person wants to commit suicide, in my opinion, that's their right. Dakota says in the chat, I, as a student, did not participate in that march. Well, good for you, DeCoyote.
Adults let us down. And at this point, I don't even know if the adults in power who are funded by the NRA, I don't even think we need them anymore because they're going to be gone by midterm election. There's barely any time for them to...
I would say that we do need them, or at least those of us who actually do believe in gun rights, that we do need them. Now, I'm not defending Republicans because there are a whole lot of flaws with the Republican Party. Not being strong enough when it came to Obamacare during the Obama years. I mean, argue all you want during the Trump years. I mean, even during the Trump years, they aren't going for a complete repeal, even though they have the power to completely repeal it. No, they're doing these little pokes and prods, like taking away the individual mandate, which that's good on them, but they weren't doing a full repeal. That shows weakness. I mean, for the longest time, Trump and the Republicans did not fund the border wall, the staple of Trump's campaign. That's some flaws of the Republican Party. But when it comes to guns, I think that overall they are doing an all right job in that area. And so in response to our favorite skinhead lesbian, yeah, there are some of us who do want them to stay in power so that they could protect our gun rights. Thank you. Jimmy also says in the chat, but they do want to take our guns. Also, did you hear about the person in North Carolina? I believe he is running for sheriff. Said he would be happy to take guns from our cold, dead hands. Wow. Those are like literally fighting words right there. I mean, if that is really what the person said, yeah, I say fuck him.
Save their skins, and if they don't turn around right now and state their open support for this movement, they are going to be left behind because you are either with us or against us at this point.
we are giving a lot of the politicians.
Well, I'm not a politician, but it's safe to say that I'm not with you, so I guess I'm against you guys.
That we feel neglected by a clean slate, because that's the past, and we understand that.
Okay, he's being pretentious some more. I mean, he's all like, I forgive you for the past. But yet this kid, as Jimmy Hall said, later gets all nasty with Rand Paul. I thought you said that you forgive these guys for the past when it comes to the issue of guns. But then about a month later, and under a month later, you go, you get all proud of the fact that Rand Paul got attacked. Jimmy Hall says, do you have a Twitter? I can send you the video. Yeah, Jimmy, I do have a Twitter. It should be down in the description box below in this video. Yeah. Scroll down to the bare bottom of the description. You'll see my Twitter handle, twitter.com/ZTEdwards. There it is. And De Coyote says, I hope he does not win that election. Yeah, really, De Coyote. Getting on with this.
But from here on, we are creating a badge of shame for any politicians who are accepting money from the NRA.
That does not address the issue in of itself. Like, are you going to attack the issue of gun rights and go pushing your issue of gun control, your proposal for gun control? Are you just going to keep on going off of this virtually ineffective issue of that being donations?
It is a special interest group that has most certainly not our best interests in mind, and this cannot be the normal. This can be changed, and it will be changed. And anybody who tells you that it can't is buying into the facade that is being created by the people who have our blood on their hands.
Okay, the thing about gun rights is that it's a hands-off thing. I mean, I said this earlier, but I'm going to emphasize it again. People who are pushing for gun rights and pushing for less government intervention, that's a hands-off policy. And if you have your hands off completely on all issues in the country, I don't see of how you can have blood on your hands. I mean, unless the NRA or some other gun rights advocate was telling some other stooge to go commit a shooting, unless they were actually doing that or committing the shooting themselves, I don't see how blood is on their hands. De Coyote asks in the chat, is there a conservatarian party? I don't think so, De Coyote. I mean, conservatarian is still a fairly new term.
David, a lot of people saw the reporting that you did from inside the school while the shooting was taking place, and I'm truly sorry that all of you had to live through that. But I want to read to you what President Trump said last night. He said that it's actually the Democrats that have let you down because they didn't pass legislation when they controlled Congress. Does he have a point?
I have to say that to play devil's advocate, that is a little bit of a diversion. To say that because they did not act in the past, therefore we cannot act in the present, that's a bit of a stupid argument. And now let's listen to our favorite sourpuss face, David Hogg.
President Trump, you control the House of Representatives, you control the Senate, and you control the executive. You haven't taken a single bill for mental health care or gun control and passed it. And that's pathetic. We've seen a government shutdown. We've seen tax reform, but nothing to save our children's lives. Are you kidding me? You think now is the time to focus on the past and not the future to prevent the death of thousands of other children? You sicken me.
I just want.
I'll give you another line of thinking, kid. I think, oh man, I wish I could remember the exact number of self-defense instances there are with guns, but it's something it's at least 500,000. I think when I last checked, it was like in the range of 500,000 to 3 million. Can't remember where exactly I read this from, but that's how many self-defense instances there are with guns. I mean, think about it, David. If you was to like push for heavier gun reform, you're going to make it harder for people to self-defend themselves in that case, and you're going to see that that number of self-defense cases go down and the number of gun homicides, like gun murders, go up. I mean, there's another way of looking at it. If you want to go talking about saving children's lives, like the thing about the reason why people are pushing for gun rights is so that people can protect their own children's lives.
I want to say something I've heard a lot is the word gun rights, and that has the connotation.
Yeah, gun rights, gun rights, gun rights. I'm saying that a lot. We like our guns, we like our self-defense, we like our hunting, we like our sports, we like everything. I mean, we like our ability to resist the government if they get too tyrannical, and so on and so forth.
That we are trying to strip people of their rights.
Okay, what I am hearing from you guys is that you want to ban AR-15s. That's a general thing that I'm hearing. Want to ban AR-15s. I mean, you're saying right now that you don't want to take away people's rights, but at the same time, people like you, and as we will see later, there is like some corporate donor to the Republican Party that wants AR-15s essentially banned. So to say that the gun control camp here does absolutely not want to take away people's rights is, quite frankly, a lie. And I've personally talked to somebody over a live stream that said that they want to prevent mentally ill people from getting guns, even though, again, a very low percentage of them actually end up violent. So, the Coyote says in the chat, David Hogg, no, David Hogg is awful. Jimmy Hall says, the Duke boys taught me to never trust a hog. Laugh out loud.
Well, first of all, we have the right to live. And second of all...
Okay. Here's... Just because... Kid, have you ever heard of the saying, my rights end where your rights begin? In other words, I have a right to run my life as much as I please until it actually directly affects your life. This includes in the issue of guns versus life. I'm allowed to, if you were going to follow this logic of my rights end where your rights begin, that means that I am allowed to own even a nuclear bomb. Even a person privately owning a nuclear bomb does not automatically invade on the right to life of other people. It's when a person starts aiming that said weapon to someone else of when their rights end and when the rights come in conflict, and especially if they actually fire that weapon on somebody else. That is definitely when their rights end. I mean, again, somebody owning a weapon does not... If I was to own a gun, which I do, by the way, that does not mean that automatically your right to life, Mr. Cameron Kasky, I guess is your name, Cameron Kasky. I own a gun right now. And because I own that gun, that does not automatically mean that you, sir, that your right to life is automatically invaded. If I was to shoot you, that is when that... Not that I'm advocating for this kid to get shot. Do not take me out of context, people. It's when that I was to shoot you of when that your rights would be invaded on. Does that make sense?
Here at March for Our Lives, at least for me, we don't want to take the guns away from Americans.
Bullshit.
My father is a police officer. He has guns. And I understand that having concealed weapons is good for...
Okay, you might not want to take away all guns. You might not want to take away absolutely all guns, at least you're claiming to. But you definitely, your camp is definitely one to take away AR-15s. That is a gun. You are taking away a person's right to own an AR-15. That is where rights, and particularly gun rights, are being invaded. Capiche?
For protecting yourself. But an AR-15 is not needed to protect your house from robbers.
Bullshit again, guy. I mean, geez, this kid, he's acting like living in a fantasy world where AR-15s, guess what, kid? AR-15s are used in self-defense cases. I mean, in my response video to Markiplier, and I'll have to cite the sources down below in the description box, but there are some cases of where people are using AR-15s to defend themselves from robbers.
It's not needed to hunt bears.
I don't know of how many people that hunt bears, but also in the Markiplier response video, I showed a clip of somebody hunting deer with an AR-15. You know, you can use an AR-15 for hunting without completely screwing up the prey. Let's see. Approve this message from Jimmy Hall. He says in the chat, remember when the left were saying cops were just racists, murderers, and now they are like only cops should have guns. Yeah, that's quite the irony right there. The same people who will be criticizing the cops and acting like they cannot trust them to defend their lives when there is like a case of police brutality, then kind of pivot their position to be that cops are the only people that we can trust to defend our lives. And so therefore, take away this sort of gun. The Coyote says, we don't want to take away guns, says the guy who is saying no one needs an AR-15. Yeah, exactly, the Coyote. It is ironic. This guy just bleeds irony right here. We don't want to take away your liberty, but we want to take away your liberty. Fuck off.
An AR-15 is a weapon of war, and a 19-year-old...
An AR-15 is also a weapon of self-defense and hunting.
...who is mentally challenged and has problems was able to buy an AR-15 easily.
Okay, and if you want to talk about the age restriction on guns, that is a little bit different from just saying blanketly, nobody should own an AR-15.
We don't want to disarm America. We want to make America...
You are slowly... pushing for that. Excuse me. I mean, you yourself might not ever want to take away handguns, but you take away AR-15s, you will have taken a one step from your future generation out of the way in their push for gun control. Whereas they don't have, the future generation won't have to focus on AR-15 because the past generation already pushed for the banning of AR-15s and was successful in that. So the future generation will then start pushing for handguns. I mean, I know it's kind of a slippery slope fallacy that I am pulling right here, but making that slow push all the same. Jimmy Hall also says in the chat, first they come for the bump stock, then they come for the magazine size, then they come for some other gun attachment, then they come for certain types of guns, and on and on. Yeah, exactly. And the Coyote said right before him, irony. Yep. Lots and lots of irony.
America have to work for their weapons, and we have to make sure that everybody who has this kind of power in their hands has been cleared to have it. Because if Nicholas Cruz had gone through 5 minutes with any medical professional, they would have said, this person does not need an AR-15. This person needs a counselor. And 17 people would not have needed graves.
Yeah, but then some other people would have still been dying. I mean, here's the thing. I really think that if, I really don't think that it matters if there's only like even just one school shooting per year in the country. I mean, all in all, school shootings and mass shootings, they only contribute a very small percentage. They don't even contribute a full percent, but a decimal of a percentage of the amount of gun homicides in this country. The only reason why they get the most attention, why they end up inadvertently bringing up the conversation of guns, and the reason why they are using it as an example of why that we need gun reform is because it's such a large amount of loss of life in one single event. And because of the concentrated loss of life in that case, it ends up pulling more at the heartstrings of Americans in the country. And my thought is, it doesn't matter if we like stay with the same amount of yearly mass shootings and school shootings now, or if we just limit it down to one. I mean, even if there was that one school shooting a year, the gun conversation is going to be brought up again, and then people are going to push for more gun control to prevent absolutely any mass shootings from happening. But school shootings, murder is not going to go away completely. Gun murders, gun homicides, and so on and so forth. Not going to go away completely. And if anybody out there thinks or acts like it is possible, is living a pipe dream. Descartes also says in the chat, we don't want to disarm America. This guy would fail at a polygraph test. Yeah.
Goddamn, man. Goddamn. This moment feels different. It really does. I don't know exactly why.
Yeah, it feels different because the crackpot logic of we don't want to take away your guns, but at the same time we want to ban AR-15s logic is being brought up more and more.
I mean, I guess it's because the students are taking the lead. These people were just in a school as a mass shooting happened, and they saw their friends get fucking gunned down. But this one feels different. There was more, I don't know the right word for it. There was more concision and more directness and less bullshit on this issue in that short clip than on anything I've ever heard any Democratic politician say on this issue ever. There was no beating around the bush. There was no flowery rhetoric. It was all directly to the point. Hey, we need some...
No flowery rhetoric. Come on. Don't give me that bullshit. I mean, they were trying to sound all flowery by saying we don't want to take away people's gun rights. They were trying to sugarcoat their rhetoric is what they were, to make it sound more appealing for gun rights advocates.
Something to be done. Here's generally what we support. We're going to march on this issue to show everybody how serious we are on it. One of the kids said to Trump, shame on you. Shame on you. Because Trump said, hey, the Democrats, blame them because there was a time that they had a supermajority and they didn't get anything done.
And again, I will say that was pretty stupid. Like I said, I'm not here to defend Trump or Republicans or the NRA. I'm just here to defend gun rights and to say how talking about NRA funding does not get to the crux of the matter and is virtually a distraction. And as I said in that CNBC article that I read earlier in the stream kind of emphasized that more in detail than I ever could.
That's half true. But the part of it that's not true is, bitch, you control everything right now. So go do something right now. If you're saying, hey, he should have done something when he had control, okay. But by your own logic, you should do something now because you have control. Do it. But no, they're not doing it. But again, this is what a moment this is, because it's almost like the younger generation got so fed up, and then they witnessed this, and then it's all out there now. Really, you motherfuckers have been sitting around doing nothing, taking checks from the NRA as you...
Yeah, which does not affect their beliefs. I mean, would they really still not believe in gun control if they did not take money from the NRA? I would think that they still would not.
Let 32,000 people die every year in this country from guns.
Okay, the 20,000 of them about are suicides. And I will emphasize again that suicides should not technically be considered as a crime, I think, because when I say that people have the right to life, I would think, or at least us conservatives and libertarians, mean that people don't have the right, people have the right to not have their life taken away by other people, but they can kill their own life if they want to. Suicide is a right, in my opinion. So break it down to 10,000. Now let's move on.
10 to 12,000 homicides every year,
which has been dropping.
Don't tell me there's nothing you could do. That's just not true. Of course there's something you could do. You're choosing not to do it. So we're going to fucking make you do it. How about that? And they're right, man. So this one does feel a little different. I don't know if anything will happen. I mean, after Sandy Hook, when we didn't get gun control, we didn't get any kind of gun reform. You know, every reasonable people were saying, including myself, well, if this didn't change us, nothing's going to change us. But this one is like, it's a tipping point a little bit, it feels like, because now the kids are speaking out. And man, they're made for this moment. They're all really good. The points they're making are all great.
You know who was also made for this moment? Kyle Kulinski. Yeah, quite ironic. You have Kyle versus Kyle. I'm mentioning another guy named Kyle to respond to Kyle Kulinski. Kyle Kulinski was also made for this moment to defend gun rights.
And I love how they kept hammering away on money in politics.
Even though they weren't bringing up any alternatives to actually attack the issue of gun murders.
Because that's the main thing. And, you know, they probably already have made the connection, but if they haven't, wait until they make the connection of, oh shit, that's how our entire country is fucking run. You think money in politics is the problem when it comes to guns? Well, wait till you see what it does to our economic policy. You know, that's exactly why Wall Street keeps getting deregulated and we keep having fucking giant crashes. And that's why wages for the working class have been stagnant since 1980.
Yeah, and despite what money might be offered to them, to politicians to push for those agendas, if I was to be elected, I would still be against minimum wage because, by principle, I believe in private property rights. And according to private property rights, you should be allowed to run your business as you please. That means as well to pay as low a wage as you want to your employees. And no one else can tell you otherwise. But anyway, he's going off on this tangent, and I guess I'm kind of following him too well down into this economic tangent.
That's why unions are on the decline. That's why we don't have a living wage. That's why we don't have Medicare for all, because for-profit health insurance companies bought our politicians. So the issue of money in politics is polluting every issue in the United States of America, and that's why our government routinely has like a 14% approval rating.
And again, I'm feeling like a broken record here, but NRA funding does not hardly affect the principles that a politician stands for. I mean, with most of the time, these pro-gun rights politicians, they're already pro-gun rights before they ever accepted a cent from the NRA. And yeah.
When you ask, hey, what do you think of Congress? It could be just after you elect them. And their approval rating's like 20%. Because our system's fucking broken. And these kids are pointing it out a hell of a lot better than any elected Democrat has pointed it out. And the final point here is, so it does feel different this time around, but there's another reason why it feels different. Not just these kids who are doing a fantastic job, but look at this. Top GOP donor, I will not write another check until candidates support assault weapons ban.
Okay, what I have read, I think AR-15 falls under the rather dubious title of assault weapon. I mean, assault rifles, they're already banned ever since the 1980s, so that's a bit of a moot point. But here it is. I mean, just earlier, you had that Cameron character be all like, we don't want to take away your gun rights. But now, later on, you have somebody, a GOP donor who is in the same camp pretty much as Cameron on this whole gun control issue, saying, yeah, actually, we do want to take away your guns. We want to ban supposed assault weapons. Jimmy Hall says in the chat, I don't trust politicians. Dakota says, what sickens me is that Democrats claim to be pro-choice, yet they are pro-gun control and campaign against the right to own an AR-15. Yeah, pro-choice is another dubious title, and I think that a liberal progressive has less of a right to call himself pro-choice than a libertarian, in my opinion, because, hey, you are pro-choice when it comes to abortion, but you're not pro-choice when it comes to people having the right to deny service based on whatever reason that they want to in their business. You are pro-choice when it comes to abortion, but you are not pro-choice when it comes to the issue of being allowed to offer as low wage as they want. You're pro-choice when it comes to abortion, but you're not pro-choice when it comes to gun ownership. But yeah, but then libertarians, they are economically pro-choice in all three of those issues that I brought up to you. And some of them are also pro-choice when it comes to abortion. So I just kind of give, going off on this tangent, I just generally give pro-choicers when it comes to abortion. I just give them the benefit of the doubt and give them their titles because I don't feel like arguing over semantics. Jimmy Hall says in the chat, what is an assault weapon? If I hit someone with a baseball, is it now an assault weapon? Yeah. I mean, it was used for assault and it was used as a weapon. So, yeah, a little bit of a point there. But when I hear somebody say that they want an assault weapons ban, I kind of get the implication that they are pushing for a ban on semi-automatic rifles like the AR-15 and whatever guns follow under the same classification of semi-automatic. Baseball bat, whoops, says Jimmy Hall. Okay, baseball bat, baseball, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I think if you had enough power, you could probably put somebody in a coma if you thrown a baseball at their head. But anyway.
So that's the only way that we'll really get action on this issue. Not just when one top Republican donor says, I'm not going to write another check until you do something on guns, but when you actually have a coalition of top Republican donors, top corporate donors, who say, no, we're not going to donate to you until you do something about this issue. And it's possible that that happens. I mean, it's possible that we're faced with a scenario where all of the big money that's not aligned with guns lines up against guns. So you'll have the gun lobby versus every other lobby, and then obviously every other lobby is going to win because they have more money than the gun lobby.
That's already the case, actually. The NRA is outfunded almost 20-fold by the other top 20 lobbying groups. That's already the case, and yet gun rights still prevail here in this country. So what you said there was kind of a moot point and kind of stupid, Kyle. Jimmy also says in the chat, I wouldn't want to be hit by an MLB pitcher's fastball. Okay. I'm not much into sports, so I wouldn't know, but I'll just take your word for that.
That's the sad reality, is that you're not really going to get change on this until you threaten the funding sources for Republican politicians. The NRA, this is one of those rare...
And yet they'll still have the principle, most likely, of believing in gun rights. So I keep on trying to hammer this point. It's not so much of a funding aspect. It's not so much of a funding issue as it is more of a principle. And, yeah, principle and a rights issue. What principles and what beliefs people hold and so on and so forth. Jimmy Hall says, well, they can throw a baseball at 90+ miles per hour. Okay.
Of guns is one of the rare issues where almost all the Democrats have their hands clean because they don't take NRA money. There might...
Okay. He goes mentioning of how the Democrats are clean of funding when it comes to this issue. And I'm going to say that gun rights is one of the rare issues of where Republicans, almost all of them, stay strong on gun rights. I mean, with or without NRA funding.
A small number who do, but the over 90% of Democrats take no NRA money. So they're going to be on the right side of this issue when it comes to voting, but the Republicans, you can put enough pressure on them. Other donors can put enough pressure on them where they feel like, if I vote with the NRA, I will net lose more money for my re-election campaign, so I can't vote with the NRA anymore. I think that's the only thing that'll really get this to change.
And yet there will be the other lobbying groups who will fund them in replacement. They'll still have like a very large amount of money. I mean, I wish I could remember the exact statistics of the CNBC article, but it was talking about how in 2016 alone, there were 20 other lobbying groups that donated about $1 billion into the election. Whereas in a 10-year period from 1998 to right now, the NRA has only spent $200 million on political campaigns. So NRA is pretty much dwarfed. I mean, it's like as my buddy Humane Mind said in a gun control stream, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the sea of other people funding the elections, other lobbying groups.
But it would be nice if the Democrats had teeth, and they don't. Even when the Democrats are actually right on the issue, like on gun reform, they don't know how to fight for their position, which is the most embarrassing thing ever. Well,
yeah, and I love laughing at them all the way. And in fact, you know, if you want to bring up people being bad at arguing for gun control, I think that Cameron right there was being very bad of arguing for gun control because, again, he was bringing up the highly ironic talking point of we don't want to take away your gun rights, we don't want to take away your liberty, but hey, we want to just preserve our right to life, even though that does not come in conflict with the person's right to own a gun. And again, we don't want to take away your right to own guns, but at the same time, we want to take away AR-15s. Very bad arguing skills from Cameron, just probably about as bad as the corporate Democrats.
We'll get to a story on that in a second with just how clear it is that the American people want gun reform, but these kids did a fantastic job, and hopefully...
Not really. I mean, I'm not convinced anymore now that I think that I should turn in my my Glock 19.
We see more Republican donors move against the NRA, and then that's really the thing that will maybe make this instance different.
Okay, and I find it kind of ironic there that after the Secular Talk video, there's a video by the Daily Wire, one of Ben Shapiro's videos that wants to play right afterward. So again, that video was rather silly. It was talking again and again about NRA funding, even though we just read about how it affects little to none of the issue. NRA funding principal issue, a difference in beliefs more than it has to do with who has the most money. Okay, so DeCoyote says in the chat, more irony. Yeah, it was just ironic all around with Cameron, and then you had, again, that top GOP donor that later said in that Hill article, hey, we want assault weapons to be banned. One kid is saying we don't want to take away guns, we don't want to take away gun rights, but then you had one other person saying, hey, we do want to take away guns. Jimmy All says in the chat, I'm about to sound like a radical to the left. I think if a U.S. citizen can pass a background check, they should be able to buy and own military, quote-unquote, rifles, M4, M16, etc. Yeah, I actually know a liberal personally who says that he wants to allow people to even own fully automatic rifles if they want to. I mean, he thinks that there should be heavy background checks for purchasing a gun in general, but the ownership of the assault rifle itself, he's for. The guy's name is Cult of Ham, by the way. A very jaded guy when it comes to his gun rights beliefs. Anyway, I'm tired, and we just had 2 response videos right there. Yeah, that's all I have to add. Silly video from Kyle Kulinski, and an even sillier video from Progressive Voice at the beginning of this stream, and very substantive article from CNBC, and little to no substance offered by Theresa May regarding the Syria attack. And so I think that since I finally got this video out of the way, responding to Secular Talk on students lashing out over lack of gun reform and corruption in Congress, I think that since I finally got this out of the way, that I'm going just to leave the issue of guns behind for right now. This issue is done for me right now. just for right now, until like the next time it gets brought up by some politician or whatever. So in future episodes of Strike Force, I will focus on different varying issues. Like on Strike Force number 047, I'm going to be conversing / debating two people on abortion on Wednesday evening. So stay tuned for that. And after that, who knows what else will be in the news? Maybe more stuff on Syria. Anyway, Dakota says in the chat, good stream. Thank you. Jimmy Hall says, go take a nap, dude. Well, I'm going to take some kind of rest. So anyway, that's all I have to add. I'm Zach, the Dark Conservatarian. This has been Strike Force. Y'all have a good Sunday, and God bless.